Hello friends, let's draw a snow globe. This is the first part of a two-part tutorial. This week, I'm going to show you how to draw this illustration, and next week, we're going to animate it. Let's jump right into part one. As usual, I'm working in Procreate, and my canvas size is set to 3000 pixels square at 300 dpi. We're going to need quite a few layers for part two of this tutorial, so if that size gives you limited layers on your iPad, I recommend setting your canvas to 1200 or 1500 pixels square so you get more layers, but keep the DPI at 300. Let's start with a pencil sketch. First, turn on Drawing Guides by going to the Actions menu, tap Canvas, then tap Drawing Guides. I prefer to use a larger grid, so I'm going to tap where it says Edit Drawing Guide, then increase the grid size. I will be sketching with the 6B pencil, and as usual, all the brushes I'll be using throughout the tutorial are default brushes, which come free with Procreate, but of course you're welcome to use whichever brushes you prefer. The first thing we're going to do is draw a circle. By the way, in the time since my last tutorial, Procreate 5.3 was released, and you'll notice that the Edit Shape buttons have a slightly new look. As far as I can tell, they still function the same though. Okay, the circle is obviously going to be the globe part of the snow globe. Now for the base. Draw a horizontal line a little above the bottom edge of the circle and make sure it extends beyond the circle. Repeat that line and then close each end with a curve. Below that, draw two diagonal lines, then finish off the base with another horizontal section. Now you can draw a little winter scene inside the circle. This can be anything you want, maybe little animals frolicking in the snow or a sweet little cabin. Just keep in mind that a snowy scene will make the most sense since it is a snow globe. I started with a few snowy hills to anchor the scene, and remember that your larger objects will be in the foreground and have a couple smaller objects in the background to help give the scene a little dimension. Now let's start inking. First, I'm going to switch to a dark background color because that will contrast nicely against the white snow. Then I'll reduce the opacity on the sketch layer and create a new layer above. Go ahead and ink your circle. Now, just like you saw with the sketch, you're going to draw a circle freehand. Then when your lines meet, keep the pencil down to activate Quick Shape. When the Edit Shape menu comes up, tap Circle. As you can see, blue transform nodes appear, which means you can now adjust the size of the circle. Drag from any part of the circle to resize it as needed. Now you just don't want to drag from one of those transform nodes because that will change the shape from a circle to an ellipse. So just make sure you're dragging from a solid part of the line. Now create a new layer and draw another circle. This time make it slightly smaller than the first one and make sure it's centered so there's even space between the two circles on all sides. Once it's the right size and in the right position, fill the shape with color. Again, I'm using white. Now set the eraser tool to the soft brush and make the brush size fairly large. Starting from the center, slowly erase in a circular motion until most of the white is gone, except around the edges where it will gradually become more solid. Now for the base. Create a new layer above your circle, and we're going to ink the base on two different layers. First, ink the two horizontal sections on one layer. Then create a new layer below that one and ink the center part of the base. You can reduce the opacity on the layer above to make it easier to see what you're doing. You can use any color for this. I'm going with a nice neutral warm gray so it doesn't distract from the winter scene inside the snow globe. Now the reason I've done this on two different layers is so that I can individually add some dimensional shading. So select the second base layer and turn on Alpha Lock. Choose a color that's a bit darker than the color you chose for the base. And with the noise brush, you can add a little bit of shading along the top edge and along the right side. Then you can also add some shading along the bottom edge as well. Now go to the other base layer with the horizontal sections and turn alpha lock on that layer. Using a lighter color, add a little highlight along the top edge and the left side of those sections. When you're happy with how that looks, you can group those two layers together so you have just one layer for the base. Now let's ink the winter scene. Create a new layer and drag it below your sketch layer. Now, if you've watched my other tutorials, you'll know that I typically prefer to ink above the sketch, but it will be easier for you to see what I'm doing here if I keep the sketch layer visible. I'm using the dry ink brush for this, and notice that I'm inking all the way to the outer circle. That will be important for later. Since it's furthest away, the background hill will be the darkest color, then the middle hill will be a little lighter, and then the foreground hill will be in white. And keep in mind that I'm drawing each hill on a separate layer. Now I'm going to add a little shading between the hills just to give the scene a little more dimension. So I'm going to turn on alpha lock and use the noise brush to shade the bottom section in a slightly different color on each of these hill layers. For the trees, I'm going to use the Tinderbox brush, which can be found in the inking section of the brush library. This brush is textured and it has a really nice taper. So as you can see, the stroke gets wider as you apply more pressure. I can take advantage of this taper to draw the trees in a few simple strokes. So create a new layer right above the sketch layer, but make sure it's below the two circle layers. And like I mentioned, use the taper on this brush to help create the shape of the trees. I'm actually going to make these trees in the background a darker color since they're supposed to be further away. And here's another helpful update with this new 5.3 version of Procreate. Use color drop like you normally would, and now you'll see an option that says continue filling. If you tap that, you'll see that color drop stays on the screen with a blue check mark next to it. When that's visible, you can tap on any closed shape to instantly recolor it. As long as this color drop check mark is visible, you can even select new colors from your palette and continue tapping to recolor sections. When you're done with your color fills, you can just tap the check mark to exit that mode. The last thing I'll do with the trees is to add a layer of snow to most of the branches. I'm using the dry ink brush for this. Now I'm going to ink the cabin on a separate layer. I think red will be a nice pop of color. And these details are fairly small, so I'm going to use the MONOLINE brush, which will give me more precise lines. I'm going to move this hill layer above the cabin layer so it looks like the hill is in the foreground and the cabin is behind it. Then I'll finish off the cabin with a little snow on the roof. If you haven't already done so, turn off your sketch layer and then drag it to the bottom of all of your active layers. Now swipe right on all of the layers of your winter scene to select them. Then tap Group to group those layers. Our next step will be to merge this group down to one layer, which you can do by tapping on the layer group, then tap Flatten. Now my personal preference is to always keep a layered version so that I can go back and move things around, edit details, or change colors if I need to. So what I'm going to do is to swipe left on that group, then tap here to duplicate it. Tap on the checkbox to turn off the first group, and then I can flatten the duplicated group. Keeping that extra group does mean that you'll need to have an iPad that can handle lots of layers. In my case, I still have 192 layers available, but I know that won't be the case for everyone, so use whichever method makes the most sense for you. Well, now we need to crop that scene so it fits within the inner circle. We'll do that with a layer mask. Tap on your flattened winter scene layer, then tap Mask. A new layer mask will appear directly above your scene layer, and it should be highlighted in a darker blue. If your color swatch doesn't automatically switch to black, tap the swatch, go to Value, and make sure the hex code is set to all zeros. It's important to make sure you're drawing on the mask layer, so double check to make sure that layer is highlighted. Using the monoline brush, draw a circle and hold your pencil down to activate Quick Shape. Adjust the size of your circle so it matches the size and position of the inner circle. Now use the color drop to fill the area outside of the circle. So your layer mask should now have a black square with a white circle. And as you can see, it has masked the parts of the scene that we don't want to see. If your mask isn't quite in the right position, you can just go in and make adjustments as needed. For one final touch, we can add a little highlight to the glass of the snow globe. Create a new layer at the top of the stack, choose the monoline brush at a medium to large size, then draw a little arc following the curve of the globe. And then add a little dot below it. And there you have it, a simple snow globe with a cozy winter scene. Be sure to stay tuned for part 2 of this tutorial next week when I'll show you how to animate this illustration. If you decide to try this illustration and share it on Instagram, be sure to tag me in the image so I can see your art and feature it. There were so many great versions of the holiday wreath tutorial I shared a couple weeks ago, it was hard to choose, but here are a few favorites. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you'd give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.